Hello, everyone. This is September 16th. This is the Backdrop Outreach meeting. As is our practice, we will go around and do brief introductions of everyone. I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet. I'm interested in layouts and documentation and assorted odds and ends, and that's what I'm working on. Very happy to see 1.20 come out. And I will pass it over to Luke.
Hello, everybody. I am Luke McCormick, cellier in various places. I live in and coming to you from San Ramon, California. I am going to try to write up release notes for our current release. So that's what I'm focused on. But I'm very excited to hear about CiviCRM and the great activity I see in today's outreach meeting. Let me throw it over to Gregory.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm joining from Greece. I'm at the same time doing some other work, but I'm super excited about the release that came out yesterday, and interesting to hear the progress with CiviCRM, because I have not been part of this at all. I know what it is, I know what the goal is, but I have had no update. So yeah, passing on to Jack.
Hey everyone, Jack, pronouns they, them. Doing all right over here. Glad to be at a outreach meeting after a while. Mostly here to talk about the Civi stuff, but excited to hear what else has been going on in the community. And I will pass it to Joseph.
I'm Joseph from Las Vegas, Nevada, and yeah, I'd like to say that I've been doing something amazing, but I haven't really. So I'll pass it to Sarvasri.
Okay, this is Sarvasri. I'm in Walnut Cove, North Carolina, and I'm looking at creating an ultimate beginner's guide to Backdrop and working on that. I've got sort of a 0.1 version out a little bit, and I'm just here to sort of be a fly on the wall and listen in on the CiviCRM because I don't know a lot about it. Let's see. I guess we can go to Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim. Sorry about the background noise. I'm Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. It's been an exciting couple of weeks. I got, after kind of missing the last release, into the getting really active in this most recent release. So it was fun being a part of a number of pull requests that got into the new release and just being really involved. So that's it. Did we get everybody? I think we got everybody, didn't we? Anybody not introduce themselves? Okay. So we have a couple of things on our agenda today. I think, again, there's been some work going on CiviCRM for use by the Backdrop community. And today we put on the schedule a chance to sort of report back and get input, I think. Is that a good way to characterize that, Jack, from this group? And so that's one thing that's on the agenda. We also probably would like to talk a little bit about promoting the new release. And maybe, I don't know, Luke, if you have need any help with that, or would like some input on that or not, we could, if so, today would be a great time to give you that. And if there's time, something I thought would be fun to do in the outreach committee is in my experiments with Sarvasri, we have been, sort of working on some tutorial stuff. And one of the things is we were going to just do a demonstration on porting a Backdrop site to shared hosting. And so I signed up for Namecheap and got an account and started playing went in to look at how Backdrop appeared in the Softaculous installer on their hosting platform, which is something I've been meaning to do for a really long time, and probably a lot of us don't have the chance to do. And I think it would be interesting to do a quick screen share to just show you sort of what I found and how backdrop is visible, at least through Softaculous on Namecheap, and that's probably representative of a lot of shared hosting platforms. So we can save that for the end if we have time. There's nothing urgent in it. If anybody else has anything else we need to talk about today? No? Should we start with the CiviCRM stuff? Okay. Jack, can I ask you to sort of kick that off and summarize?
Sure, yeah. So today, I think basically we just wanted to update folks who come to outreach meetings about the work we've been doing to get CiviCRM ready to use as the CRM or constituent relationship manager for the backdrop community. Outreach meeting is a good place to bring it because what we're trying to do here is have one place where folks who are involved in outreach and like volunteer management, doing events, handling donations, etc., can centralize all of that information for more effective efforts on all of those things, the outreach side of things, fundraising, volunteer management, etc. So folks have been talking about this for a while in the backdrop community, and CiviCRM rose up as a natural choice. So to be our CRM of choice, it's you can find it at CiviCRM.org if folks don't know about it already. It's a long-standing open source constituent relationship management system that I think it started out in Drupal and was early on ported over to Backdrop because that's relatively easy to do from Drupal. So it's been out for Backdrop for a while now. It's actually not even in full release for like Drupal 8, 9, or 10 yet, but it's full release for Backdrop and very well integrated. So makes a lot of sense for us to use it for all sorts of reasons. So we've been working on this project in a few different spots, and I'm going to share some links just to catch folks up on that. I can put them in the chat here, or I can put them in the Zulip. Which one is better for folks?
Well, I've already linked twice in the last 20 minutes to the GitHub thread in Zulip. So it's there. You don't need to edit there.
Okay, cool. I'll put in the chat just in case this other view of it, which is there's a way in GitHub, which we use for all our stuff, where you can actually create a little project. And so one of the projects in GitHub is getting CiviCRM on backdropcms.org. So that's the link I just dropped in the chat here. And you can see the different slowly moving pieces in this process. There are a few things in progress right now. There's kind of the larger conversation that was opened up by Laren actually a while ago about setting up Civi for the backdrop community. That's issue number 782 in GitHub. And that's where we started talking about all of this. You can see lots of kind of like the what's and whys of it there. And then we organized a few meetings and came up with two different kind of veins of work. So some folks are working on the technical side of things, and you can see the work on that in issue 789 in GitHub, and I'll drop a link to that in the chat. So on the technical side of things, update there is basically things have stalled for a little bit just because of capacity on folks on different. My coworker Morgan has been working for a while along with Justin to get pull requests together and to start testing backdropcms.org with Civi installed. So that is in progress, and we actually are about to get that updated and tested on a test site before we get it installed on the live site. Obviously, we want to make sure that installing CiviCRM, doing a very basic installation, doesn't break anything on our main backdrop website. So Tim, and I'll actually let Jen know as well, you'll be able to log into our test site soon to kick the tires on that and make sure that's okay. So in terms of the technical side of getting installed, we're pretty close to be able to do that. It's going to be a very basic installation that will gradually build out over time with help from folks like Eric and Laren and other folks who have already expressed interest in helping getting things installed, configured, set up properly to do what we want to do. So that's all been on the tech side of things, and that's captured in that issue there. And then there's been the other side of things, which is like more the end user planning for CiviCRM. And I'll drop that into the chat as well. That's GitHub issue 790. So far that's mostly been me and Tim and Jen talking together about how exactly we're going to use CiviCRM in this community. And that brings up a whole lot of things, like what are our policies for what information we do or do not collect in the database? What are our policies about permissions? You know, how are we going to do work on this? Who can change configuration? Who can add data in, etc. So we've been discussing all of that stuff, talking about probably starting a working group that kind of focuses on this like community management type of stuff, where people can go to get access to CiviCRM and learn how we're like structuring this whole process and get involved in all these efforts. So there's a lot of meeting notes. We've had a couple of end user meetings so far, and there's meeting notes that are in that last issue that I dropped in there, so folks can get all caught up on what we've discussed before. We're having another end user meeting, let's see, when is it? Next Friday. Let's see, the info is, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and there's a world time clock thing link in there so folks can get it translated to wherever you are. And next time around, we're going to keep on having a policy discussion kind of about, you know, what we're putting into Civi, who can access Civi, how we're using it together, how we decide what to do in it. So that is kind of an organized thing, that we're not just all going in and messing around with the configuration and settings and stuff and, you know, willy-nilly, that we're coming to agreements about how to do this stuff for the priorities for the community. So we'll keep on talking about that. And at the next meeting, we're also going to do a little show and tell. Lots of us have our own CiviCRM installations on Backdrop in different places, and we kind of want to show each other what we've been doing so that folks will get an idea of what can be done with CiviCRM. The last thing I'll say before I stop just talking at y'all and giving you the update is, I should have said this earlier, so the things we are planning to use Civi for at the start, it's in some notes that I have. Let's see. Well, I could probably just remember it actually. So the primary things I think that we're using Civi for to start are volunteer management. We're hoping to get donations in there. Well, volunteer management, so CiviCRM has a whole thing called Civi Volunteer, and it is specifically for managing volunteers and like shifts and, you know, like really detailed stuff. First, we're starting off with just basic contact management of like, you know, who is in our community, who has expressed interest in doing this and that, stuff like that. We're also using it for donations. We're working out with the Software Freedom Conservancy, hopefully getting donations right into our account through CiviCRM so we can streamline the donation process and also keep track of who are our donors so we can reach out and say, hey, thank you, please donate again. And finally, event management. So y'all know that we've had a few different websites, different ways that we've had people registering for events. By consolidating all of this into one place, it'll give us a much better understanding of like who's involved in our communities in all these different ways and make it a lot easier to reach out to folks. So that's kind of like the update to date in terms of what we figured out and where we're at. And I think we just wanted to bring it to the outreach meeting because obviously CRM, with all the stuff we mentioned, has a lot to do with outreach. We want to let folks know what we're doing on this, get any input or thoughts from folks on this, but also encourage folks to come to the meetings that we're having for this to get more involved and to actually work on it if you're interested. So I'll kind of stop there and see first if there's anything that I left out, but then open it up for questions, discussion.
Well, just thank you, Jack, for keeping this process moving. Jack has really kept this going. We've had now a couple of meetings and stretched out over, I think this most recent initiative has been going on for a couple of months with just a few meetings. Personally, I'm really interested in using it for volunteer management. So in kind of the way you described. starting light, and we're building our way up. But yeah, I think we're trying to figure out, we're making some decisions about sort of how it's going to be managed and how that'll fit in, say, for example, with the outreach group. And that was part of the reason to come here today. If you really want to get involved and be a part of managing it and having input, yeah, that meeting next week would be great. So I don't think I have anything else really to add. I'm curious to see if, anybody has any questions or any thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious about, first of all, it sounds totally separate and important task that it should have its own repo or some way to manage it, and also its own committee. You've decided against that?
You want to go ahead, Jack?
Yeah, so on the tech side of things, Morgan and Justin have already been working on it for a while, along with Jen. I can catch up on that ticket side of things too. So CiviCRM, the installation is within the backdrop installation. It's all kind of one and the same. So Civi is going to wind up in the backdrop repo, the backdropcms.org repo. So there's already been pull requests and stuff like that to start getting it in there, even though it's not actually installed. And Morgan and Justin have been working really on that. So that's how that's going to work from a technical perspective in terms of where it goes. And
sorry, the next thing was who's going to have access to it? And as I said, it feels important. See how we have the leadership sort of like page? I would like to have a page with, go-to people at least, who's managing, who's approving things, what is the process for someone to be onboarded? And because there's privacy, there's personal data as well, so there's a lot of things. So I was wondering about the plans and what has already been discussed with regards to that.
yeah, we've actually spoken a lot about that so right now on backdropcms.org, folks probably know, how many folks on this call have a user with editor or admin access? There's lots of us. So right now it's a bit, we don't have a very solid structure around what happens on the website in terms of like, how do we agree to make changes, add content, do things like that, right? So when it comes to that's one thing for the website. When it comes to the CiviCRM, it feels like an even more sensitive thing because of what Greg said. There is private information, there's contact information, there's stuff like that. People send a mailing out if they wanted to. We certainly don't want folks just like kind of their own accord deciding to send a mailing without consulting other folks, right? So we want to have two things. We want to have like standards around how folks get access to it. And we want to have a place where folks go to get involved, to work on it, and to decide together how it's all, like, how we're going to use it. So a few things towards that. One is that we're probably going to have CiviCRM works with backdrop roles. So whatever CMS it's in, most of the permissioning is done by assigning roles and permissions in backdrop. There's also some more advanced permissioning that we can do, ACLs, access control lists for specific things, so CiviCRM if we want. We'll probably start with the former. And folks will get the role that gives access to CiviCRM if you're part of the working group that we've started talking about. So at our most recent meeting, I think that the August 27th meeting, let me see. Yeah, we started talking about these policy decisions we need to make, who's using Civi, who can access what, who changes things, what do we put in it or not. So there's a lot of info in our meeting notes about that. And we decided, yeah, we should have maybe a community management committee is what we came up with first. Like, so we have these outreach meetings, and the outreach meetings are great because like all of us can come to it, talk about outreach, hear about outreach, give input, stuff like that. But there also has to be a space for kind of like more focused working on particular things, including CiviCRM stuff and the things we're doing with Civi, like sending mailings and organizing events and stuff like that. So we're looking at probably this community management committee, a new committee within the backdrop community that we'd like to also pitch to folks as a place where these decisions get made. And where this access is granted. In terms of how we make decisions, we talked a bit about that there. And instead of like a kind of a top-down thing where there's like let's say a core person who like makes the decisions on what to do with Civi, instead we're gonna make sure that when we bring configuration changes or significant changes to what content we're tracking, that we're going to bring that back to the whole committee, make sure folks get to see it, make sure we get consensus on it before making that change, and make sure the change is done in a way that's like documented and understood so that no one is like surprised or shocked, because it could be a real pain, especially CiviCRM, if you change a whole lot of config stuff to move that back to something else afterwards. So that's kind of like a brief I don't know how brief that was, but that's an overview of what we've discussed so far, and all these big questions that come up when we're using a CRM and giving folks access to it through the website we already have. Yeah, I see Robert with a hand. I also see Luke off of mute. So Luke, if you want to get in the stack, let us know.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for all this work, and I kind of apologize for not responding to being tagged a few times in the discussions. And I'm anxious to jump in and be involved, particularly in sort of the user interface, information architecture aspects of it that seem to be coming up.
Awesome. Yeah, then definitely come to the end user meetings. That's where we're figuring out all this stuff. So,
next Friday.
Awesome. Go for it, Robert.
So I have a question and a comment. The question relates to one of the things Civi is really good at is events, registrations and all that sort of thing. And if Civi's on backdrop.cms, thus far, our events have been on events.cms, and the user accounts are distinct. So can you talk a little bit about what your thinking is on sort of how to integrate Civi across our sites if it's at all possible?
I can speak to that. I can also speak to it next book in tugs. So I'll let Tim take a crack.
Okay. I don't know if it was my connection or yours, Jack, but I couldn't quite hear what you said, but I think you just asked me to go ahead. Can everybody hear me right now?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay, and I apologize. I know there's some background noise, but I hope it's not too bad. Okay. Yeah, so the events, one of the early sort of big issues that to some extent I think we kicked the can down the road a little bit on was the integration with like how to use it with all the sites, right? And especially like events. And I think that our decision has been to get started with backdropcms.org. And actually, I'm going to go back to the question Gregory asked earlier about like having a separate repo. We did talk about whether or not we should set up a completely separate installation of Backdrop to manage CiviCRM. But I think the thought was that there's too much data already in backdrop.org, and it just kind of made sense to do it there. So we think we should just start with backdrop or cms.org, integrate it there, primarily use it within that site, not really addressing the whole like single sign-on between sites at this stage. These are things we will have to address. Jack mentioned earlier that one of the uses for it would be managing events. My understanding is that we don't have immediate plans to we don't have an integration right now between events.backdrop.org and the regular backdrop.cms.org. And we don't plan to just sort of shut down and move all the event stuff. We are doing, there's a lot of content around events that I'm not sure we're comfortable like bringing that all into backdrop.org yet. So for the short term, I think we'll be using CiviCRM in parallel with events.backdropcms.org. Not as fully integrated as they could be, but looking for opportunities to integrate them and sort of figuring out what the path is down the road. So, but I think like the next Backdrop Live, even if we got CiviCRM going next week, we'll still run the next Backdrop Live on the event site, and they won't be directly connected. However, we might start looking for ways to get at least some of the information into CiviCRM, right away. even if it's not a complete, comprehensive integration. Does that answer that question? Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to was more of a comment based on experience of running a CiviCRM site on Drupal for a while. That and the recent experience of making part of my morning routine, deleting the 10 to 20 spam accounts that are created each day on backdropcms.org. And if we collect data using the CiviCRM profiles on registration, that can help, then spam defenses can use that as information to weed out spammers. And it's an iterative process to figure out what are the things to look for, but that's turned out to be a really good tool on the site that we have, where we collect a lot of information at registration and then block 50 people every day.
That's good news. I thought you were going to say the opposite, was that it was going to be a problem for spam. So, but if it's going to help us, that's a great thing.
No.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, so when the user accounts are created, we're going to have some CiviCRM integration right off the bat, because backdrop user accounts can be connected to the CiviCRM record. So something will be created for accounts. We'll have to weed out the ones that are spammy. But yeah, I think, Robert, you're right. Like, if we can ask for more information that goes directly into CiviCRM on the user registration form, and we can think about what to ask for and how to use that in spam defense for sure. And yeah, just adding to what Tim said before. So yeah, events is the last thing we're planning to do. I think we put in order of priority. First, we want to start out tracking donations, because right now we only track any donations or event registration donations through, like, there's barely any tracking. It's really mostly done through PayPal. We don't have ways to reach out to people again, things like that. So we're going to start with donations, then mailings through it, so we could get off of MailChimp because there's limitations there anyway. Then after that, but we could kind of be doing it at the same time, community member info, just like interest, how folks want to be involved with stuff, so that we can do things like reach out to everyone who said they want to help out on front end stuff or help out, whatever it is. Then event registration. Luckily, because we are doing everything in Backdrop, for event registration, we can easily export stuff and bring it into the Backdrop Civi site on backdropcms.org if we need to. So at the very least, we can export and import stuff, but we're going to think through more together of like how to get them integrated, or how to move the event stuff, like what to move into backdropcms.org, what to keep separate, all of that. So that'll be discussions to have down the road.
Does anybody have any other questions or any other specific ideas on how you think we should be either implementing this or particularly around using or managing it, like, or a specific way that you'd like to be involved? I think that's the other thing that would be nice to know.
Is
Yeah,
there
I'm looking at you, Luke.
I'm curious, like I mentioned information architecture, right? Like basically the schema for the thing. I'm curious. I mean, when I've tried to fire up CiviCRM on my own, I've gotten overwhelmed with a million fields. So I'm curious if we've made that fit with our use case yet. Have we reduced the number of fields? Do we understand? I mean, I assume you understand them. I'm curious how we're going to get past like the thing that actually stopped me. Like I went, I was like, oh, I'll figure this out, and I opened it up, and like suddenly there's like a million controls. I'm like, I really don't know how this works. So I'm curious how we get over that.
Word, I could speak to that a little. So on one side of things, I think it's super helpful that we have folks like Morgan already working on it, and also like Eric and Laren and other kind of CiviCRM heads, right, who are going to help us with getting the configuration in place so that that side of things is not so daunting. It's also good because folks who are experienced with Civi know kind of what needs to get turned on and what can be ignored in order to do the things you want to do. So they'll be able to help us kind of, we don't have to look at, but get the stuff we need to do the stuff we want configured properly, right? So I think on one side of things is like having that ongoing support too from folks that have expressed interest in continuing to help us use Civi well. So there's that. Then there's also like, so when you open up Civi and look at a contact record, there are a ton of fields that can be filled out for a given contact. And then if you get into events and activities and things like that, each of these has a lot of fields that can be quite daunting. But I think the key for us will be figuring out, which is part of a big thing we're going to talk about next time, what is it that we do want to collect about our contacts and what do we not want to collect? And then basically just worrying only about the stuff that we do want to populate. It's a little bit of a just like, if you're on the admin side of things going into Civi, just the thing of remembering like, here's the fields I care about, here's the fields I don't. There's a certain amount of hiding or not overcomplicating things you can do. But mostly I think it's going to be a matter of just us knowing like, here's what we pay attention to, here's what we do not, and having it configured so we're not overloaded with too much of what we don't need. And I think on the other end of it, on the end user side, or not end user, folks who are not Civi admins, not having to go into CiviCRM, we can get folks to fill out much more simple forms to give us their info. CiviCRM has something called profiles, where basically you choose exactly what fields you want someone to fill out. It could be fields that go into all sorts of different places in Civi, but to the user, it just looks like one very simple form. So like, we're never going to confront anyone who we want in our contact database with all of those fields and options that Civi gives. We're always going to pare it down. There's actually very nice integration with web forms, CiviCRM. So we could do it through backdrop web forms, and it's kind of a nice fit there. So I think those are the things I could think of for tackling the Civi overwhelm that can definitely happen.
Yeah, well, I'm aware with this kind of thing that it's one of those things that makes adoption difficult because you're picking on a system that has lots and lots of capabilities, and it's clear to me that CRM is inherently complicated in this sense. Like I had a Salesforce developer account for a while and mucked around with that, and it looks just like CiviCRM. It's the same thing. You open it up and you've got like 95 fields with similar sounding names to it, and and you're like, all right, I'm sure this must be useful, but like until you've got actually a user, like a critical mass of data, I'm sure it's hard to figure out like which pieces are there. And it's tempting, because they're configurable systems, to think like, okay, well, we'll simplify the form so that it doesn't look good. But I know that, that's cart horse sort of things, right? Like if you have time to do that, you'll have time to figure out the whole thing. So all I'm asking is that as we dive into some point, we just kind of document the things that the people know. And it's like, okay, someday we'll clean up these forms, but until we do, make sure you fill out these 5, maybe do these 3, definitely ignore these 9, and just something, like a cheat sheet for what you need to actually move forward with it.
Anybody else? I'll just add to that. I don't know if this is exactly the point you're making, Luke, but just some blog posts about our process, would be an outreach, and this is the outreach meeting, and we're always looking for content for our website. And some sort of, if we could, I think you were talking more about documenting some of the real technical things for other users that need it, but also I think on just a high level, like what our process has been to make this decision and integrate it. Could be educational for other groups, and it could be sort of help make people aware of opportunities to use CiviCRM.
Yeah,
so by outreach opportunities here as well. Yeah, go ahead.
By document, I mean like README level stuff, like something, just text that fits on the screen. fill these forms, don't fill these forms, optional. For God's sakes, don't ever click this button. You just what anything you need to know to like not blow up the system at some point.
Yeah, I think for folks who, obviously again, for folks who are not like admins in Civi and going in there, none of like that won't be a worry. Like the forms we present to the general public we're gonna have to like there's nothing we can show them that's not cleaned up. Like we're gonna have to like design them, so that'll be good. And yeah,
Okay,
for
cool.
us internally, I think it's important, and that's what we're trying to do in the meetings and in the meeting notes and stuff, is document these decisions about like what do we want to collect, what's important for us to have, what do we want to use this for, and then have real clear guidance for all of us working on it, like on that stuff, like readme level guidance, like simple straight up guidance like you're suggesting, documentation of how we're using the system, because it is a really complex system. It could be used in all sorts of ways, but we want to have some standards, common focuses.
I think it's a good thing to keep in mind in general. I mean, within the overall backdrop project, and even related to Drupal, that's like an ongoing thing. Is almost all the Drupal sites that I've worked on over the years, like no one ever bothers to simplify the admin interface, and so you have the poor content editors who end up having to work on things. There's these endless menu items, any one of which they could click and destroy the system, and they have to like desperately try not to click on the wrong thing. So yeah, it's one of those things that WordPress gets right. You open a WordPress and there's this nice administration interface where you can basically not get into trouble. And we should have that in our DNA.
Okay, so we're 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through this meeting, and the intent wasn't to take up the whole meeting with CiviCRM. So is there anything else urgent on this, or should we can we move on and talk about a few other topics? I'd like to stress, I'm also a little sensitive about the fact that some people are really disappointed they couldn't be here. So I'd like to, not cover everything in this meeting, but save some for the next one, where maybe some other people can attend, and maybe make the final point that it is exactly this. We know there are people out there that are interested in this topic and might be feeling a little bit left out. And that's why we need CiviCRM, is because we don't have good ways of sort of track, we all sort of know in our heads who the people are who've expressed an interest in CiviCRM. Jack has made an attempt to sort of tag people, I think, in some posts to draw their attention to it. I did the same today in Zulip, but we don't have an easy way to just sort of say, hey, let's notify all the CiviCRM people about this next upcoming meeting. And hopefully CiviCRM will give us that. So yeah, hopefully there's a brighter future in terms of keeping people engaged in the topics that they're interested in a more proactive way. So it sounds to me like we're comfortable moving on, and because it seems like the next most important topic is we had a release yesterday, and what a lot of us are excited about it and how we can promote that. And I don't know. Should we start with you, Luke? You're still on board to do a blog post?
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally excited. But actually, one of the things that would be so helpful for me is just throw out what are you excited about? What is the, because I want to make sure it doesn't get lost, and then we'll clean up the pieces. What's your favorite part of the new release?
I'm going to let anybody else want to start with that.
I don't think this is part of the release, but the new testing infrastructure.
It was a big relief to, we did get very, very few random failures, but it was just a matter of, restarting the tests. And then it was a relief to actually know that when you run the tests, you're going to get useful results, and you're not going to result in spending all your day restarting them, and not getting consistency. I'm really excited about telemetry because it's a thing that I've been advocating since the Drupal days, even before Backdrop. Because I know that this telemetry has been implemented and it means various things for various people, but for me, it means better informed decisions instead of making assumptions of how useful or how popular a thing is, we now will have some metrics eventually. We'll have some metrics to back that up. And it's a big thing for me. And of course, recipes, but I'll not recipes is not a new thing, but we made progress, but I'll let Tim talk about that.
Anybody else before I'd like to add my 2 cents, but Robert, anything you're excited about that you want to mention?
Oh, it's narrow and parochial, but I'm happy to get to see the new hook in layouts and what that allows for layout customization and using layouts on multiple pads.
The what layouts?
We'll start with a new hook for layouts, but that makes it easy to use the same layout on different pads. That isn't easily doable before.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but this is going to require a contrib module to fully utilize, isn't it, or not? Is there anything in core that just allows someone to use it through the UI? That option?
No, it allows it makes it easier for a contribute module, which there is one, which is layout wildcard, but it also makes it easy. Again, if you're going to write code, it makes it easy for you to write your own code if you want to do things with layouts that are not easily supported in core. And I think ultimately it will make it easy to migrate some of that functionality from the contrib module into core, which is kind of what I'm looking at now.
Another layout related thing would be correct me if I'm wrong, it got in, didn't it? The whole revamp of the flexible layout template page. We got that in, didn't we, or not?
It did not make it. It did not make it, unfortunately. So this was another thing which was not a single thing that excited me about these releases, was that we had so many improvements that regarded user experience and getting consistency among different parts of the user interface. We got so many things in, but still certain things were left out. So there's plenty to do. But the thing that I was excited about was that because everyone has got their own daily routines, their lives, their work, is the way that the community coordinated. And there was, when people couldn't complete their pull requests, other people might jump in and, base a new pull request off of the previous person and drive things to an end, to the finish line. And that was really exciting as well. It was really great to see in action.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Luke, for PR purposes, some of the things I'm most excited about aren't the best things in a press release. And one of them is like what Luke or Greg just talked about. Was, to me, part of the excitement of this release was just that I got really involved. And so I helped out with some obscure bug fixes that really aren't PR worthy, but it was fun to be a part of getting these things fixed that have been there for 4 or 5 years languishing.
Oh, that sounds like something could be talked. I don't know if it's release notes so much, but certainly like blog post and that's sure. Definitely fodder for discussion and promotion.
Yeah, agreed. The other thing that Greg alluded to already that I'm excited about, but again, I'm not really sure what there is PR value, but I'm not sure how, which is the config recipes, because this is a little bit problematic for 2 reasons. One of which, it isn't so much a new feature as it is that we fixed a bug that allows us to do something we should have been able to do before, but didn't know it. That we only just recently sort of conceived of, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do X? Oh, we should be able to do that, but there's this bug. Okay, we fixed that. So it's like, it's not really a new feature. But the other problem with promoting this is that really we haven't made decisions like, what is the config recipe? How do we want to manage them? And so to make big announcements, I have been not shy about like tweeting about this, but I think as a project, we might want to be careful about like, what is we don't really know what a config recipe is. So and again, there wasn't any new feature that went into Backdrop. We just fixed a bug and suddenly you can do something that you couldn't do before. So I think we should talk
Being
about it.
being able to do something you couldn't do before is kind of the definition of a feature, right? like even if you get to it backwards, that's good. And I mean, software product releases always look like this. You know, I mean, when I download something on the iPhone, occasionally I'll go in and look at the release notes. they're always like endlessly obscure. Like now when you do this on that, it doesn't do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad somebody fixed that thing I'm never gonna. So I mean that's part of packaging stuff is making sure you're addressing it to like, okay, you might not be the audience that cares about this, but there are audiences, and here's what you need to know to get a sense for the overall flow.
I think what I would package the config recipes as a step forward and not like as a final thing, because there just aren't decisions like on how we're going to handle them, what exactly we consider them. And also there's competing ideas right now still about how we should manage them. So I don't want to send out the message that we've like decided that this has all been decided. Much more, it's just a case that this bug fix sort of allows us now to go one step further in the experimenting with them and making.
I don't want to call it a bug fix. I want to give it a positive spin there. Greg, you were dying to say something. What were you going to say?
Yeah, so if one looks at the changelog for 120, which is the minor release that was released, it doesn't do enough credit to it, because at the same time we released the 119.4 bug fix release, and in Backdrop we have this in-between thing, which is not a bug, it's not a feature, but it's a task, and usually user experience improvements fall into that category. So if one wants to see the amount of the full amount of work that has gone into this release, should also compare the changelog for 119.4, because there's things there that are not mentioned in the 120, of course, because it was in a previous release, that are amazing, like consistency in the UI, as I mentioned earlier, which is really great. One of my favorites when it comes to that is another child of Peter, BW Panda, the consistency with the machine names and labels for things in the tables. So yeah, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm of course super excited about multiple config error messages showing up on batch imports. I think that's a great feature.
It's a big one, Luke. I mean, a number of people, that's a frequent complaint from people. I think that's a big deal that you fix that. Luke fixed that, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know.
Right. Joseph fixed it, but I identified it.
Oh, well, which was the one you fixed?
No, Joseph fixed it. I'm just taking credit.
It was kind of a joint effort. It was kind of a joint effort.
I see. Okay. Well, I think ideas for Luke is one thing. Another thing would be anything else we should be doing. So we have other things on the outreach front that we do to promote our new releases. Usually we wait about 2 weeks before we do a newsletter, which is about the time our newsletter would normally come out. So the next newsletter will probably have some good coverage. We did tweet about it. I would encourage anybody who does use Twitter to like and retweet our tweets about the new release. I don't think we're hitting other platforms yet. Luke, can I put you on the spot? Can you get a Facebook post out?
Yeah.
You keep volunteering to do Facebook stuff, which is why I'm picking on you.
Totally fair. I continue to volunteer, and I'll re-promise for that.
Now, does anybody else have any other thoughts or ideas for things we could be doing better to promote our new releases, in particular this one, besides the blog post and the newsletter? Okay. Yeah, well, I'm inclined, we're almost at the hour. My little thing about showing the Namecheap Softaculous interface, probably we don't have time for. So, although we'll see if there's a dead spot in the next meeting, maybe I whip it out because I've got it ready and queued up to go. Otherwise, we'll bring it up at a future meeting.
Can I throw out something actually? Wait, when you said that, I was sort of inspired, not necessarily by that. I'm interested in that particular topic, but I think on a more meta level, planning like mini presentations in our meetings, I think might be a really kind of solid thing. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of why I'm planning to do this. I just thought it would be a useful thing to do. And yeah, so
Absolutely.
if you have some ideas, let's get things you'd like to share during the outreach meeting. If you run across things, I think, maybe we could plan one little like demo or presentation each meeting, just for some, for people to show what they found. Or
even nothing's changed. Let's educate each other about the unchanged, this thing that hasn't moved in 3 years. Maybe it should, right? That kind of thing. I think actually in the design meeting, it'd be particularly useful to have visual stuff for people to look at.
On the outreach and Softaculous front, let me mention that Softaculous tweeted this morning that they have updated to Backdrop 1.20. And I find that pretty amazing and impressive that they're, I don't know how they've systematized this or how much it's automated, but they've already pulled in our upgrade and tweeted about it. And it's like, how can we get more people doing that, right?
Yeah. Beautiful.
That would be a good thing. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and say goodbye. And hang this. We're going to be starting our dev meeting in a few minutes. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Let me find